Why did you choose theology for your major?
Because I didn't believe what I was being taught in Sunday school and church. It just didn't make sense to me. And I wanted to find out for myself what those languages really were saying. So much was just unbelievable. And of course, Dr. Perry helped me with that too. He started giving me other sources of information and turning me on to books where I could get answers to my questions. And that was a good thing because I really didn't know where to start. One of the first things he gave me was the Egyptian Book of the Dead, which I didn't even know existed. And I remember reading through it, and all of a sudden I realized what I was reading was in the Bible. And yet this book had been written thousands of years before the Bible, so I knew that they had stolen it. And of course the nun said, don't say stolen, say borrowed. Everybody borrowed. Okay, borrowed.
What style of music has been your favorite?
Well, that's easy. Big band and jitterbuggy and the kind of dancing that went on. Music today just can't hold a candle to the music of the big bands. When there were actually lyrics that had meaning.
Did you sing to all of your children?
Yes, yes I did.
Who taught you to do that?
My mother probably, because she sang a lot too. She sang in the choir, she sang for every show that came down the road, she was part of it. That's another thing she did, she acted on the stage, which embarrassed me to death.
What was the best thing about being a wife and a mother?
Well, I always enjoyed being at home with my kids. Tried to make it fun, and the only thing that bothered me was when your dad came back from the war and went on to college. I felt something was wrong because I felt I was the one that should be going to college, not him.
So I was going to ask what the worst thing about being a wife and mother was.
Worst thing was probably not always having enough money to do the things you want to, although we were very well off, more so than other people. We had a nice home, we had a big yard for the kids, we had fenced-in property, so I didn't have to worry about them running out in the street or being hit by a car. No, it was very nice. And besides that, that area of Mequon was very livable, and the people were nice. I enjoyed Mequon very much.
Let's move on to some world issues. Do you think the women's liberation movement of the 1970s helped or hurt women?
Well, I think it did both. But mostly I think it helped just because it made people aware that there were women's problems. Women were learning to speak out and ask for equal time, equal wages. They weren't just going to sit home, and of course that happened during the war. It was really the war that brought on that women's effort, because when the men went off to war, the women had to fill in. I myself worked in a factory learning to run a lathe. I never thought that I'd end up being a mechanic, but I thought it'd be nice to know something in case I had to go to work while my husband was overseas. So the marching, all that, I don't know about that part of it because I didn't take part in it, but it certainly brought the women's issues out in the front where people could look at them, at least make men aware that they were capable of more than just bearing children and raising a family.
And you said that it helped and hurt women, both. In what way do you think the women's liberation movement hurt women?
Well, in a way, I think it hurt them because some of the leaders were very anti-feminine, might be the word, by trying to be masculine, and that, I don't think that's the way to do it. I can remember certain women that came on very strong, and I think the reason that turned me off was because that's the way my mother was. She was the first woman to drive a car in the neighborhood. Nobody else had a car. We were one of the first families, and my father never drove a car. My mother drove it. And I always thought there was something wrong with that. But we were happy to have a car. But I don't think being masculine is the way for women to gain equal status with men, because they're not. They're not masculine, they're feminine. They should be.
Okay. Let's think about journalism for a moment. Do you think journalism has improved or regressed over the years, and
Well,
why?
Regressed, definitely regressed. Well, because of the internet. Nobody uses English anymore. Everything is letters and LOV and, I don't know. I don't like the way it's going. And the media exploits people and stays on the same subject, anything to draw attention to them, even though it's not always on, that's not what's happening at the time. I remember watching television and seeing the same view of a catastrophic fire that was going on. The next night they showed the same picture, and the next night again the same. I thought, I just saw that same guy. But they shot the same thing over and over to make it look like that was going on for days and days when it wasn't. It was just that one area, that one day. On the other hand, I think that catastrophes are what help make people want to help others.
Do you feel that the United States is more or less unified than it was in the past?
But in a way, it's less unified, but all it had to take was that storm, that Sandy, what was it, Sandy, the storm Sandy or something?
Mhm.
The catastrophic storm, they called it. And it showed how the United States pulled together and sent help, and how the people bonded together in New York and New Jersey and Pittsburgh and up and down the coast, which they may not have even done before. And the same thing happened in New Orleans when Katrina came through. The people bonded together and helped each other, and people put their lives at risk to help others get out of their cars when they were drowning. It brings out the best in people, actually, I think.
Did you see that on September 11th, 2001?
Yes, I did. We were on, on a boat in Alaska, a cruise ship. My husband always says, it's not a boat, it's a ship, okay? Yes.
So you saw the
Although we
country
didn't really
come
know what had
together.
happened. We didn't know what had happened. And we were kept overnight. We stayed in a hotel in Vancouver, and everyone was wonderful. Again, that showed the United States at its best, because everywhere we drove were hillside signs and flags. We support you, America, we support you, and the people in Canada were wonderful. People come together when there are bad times, much more so than when there are good times. And it's another thing today with the economy so bad, the way people have banded together and starting to help each other, and food banks are being set up, and they need help. The churches are begging people to bring in canned goods so they can feed families. And I think the worst brings out the best in people.
What has been your experience of racism and discrimination?
Well, my first run-in with racism was when your dad was down at Fort Hood in Texas. And the bus driver, we got free bus service because our men were in the service, and drove us back and forth into town and then back to the camp. And I got on the bus, I went and sat in the back, and the bus driver said, "Stop the bus." And he said, "You need to move to the front." And I didn't even know who he was talking to. And me? Yeah. Up in front. That's for blacks only. And I thought that was the strangest thing, because, oh my gosh, I was only, 18, 19 years old. I had never experienced anything like that. But he would not move the bus till I moved to the front and sat with the whites, which I thought was absolutely ridiculous. I'll tell you another thing that happened in Fort Hood. When you walked on the sidewalk and a black person was coming towards you, they would go into the gutter. They'd walk around the gutter. They never walked past you on the sidewalk. They always gave you room on the sidewalk, and I thought that was kind of ridiculous.
Hmm.